All right, good Freedom Friday. We are getting a late start on Freedom Friday. And as you can see, we picked out some event appropriate bumper music to start off this Freedom Friday session. Would you like to ride in President Xi's beautiful balloon? I think Biden would love to take a ride in it. Um, I think it'd be great if they both took a ride in it. Maybe it'd do them some good to get up in the jet stream and get some fresh air. But lots of things to talk about. So this week, as you know, NORAD, the Pentagon, discovers a initially unidentified flying object that's coming into U.S. airspace over Alaska. And there's some debate that went back and forth upon this. Anyway, it turns out that it's a balloon from China. China claims that it's a scientific balloon, alluding to the fact that maybe it's a weather meteorological survey balloon. But this has turned out not to be the case. As we're finding more and more about this story, the payload, as they called it, which would be the satellite or the solar panel arrays to power the device, and cameras and any other sensors and equipment on it. They say today, this evening, they said it was about the size of a jet airliner. Now, of course, that can vary a lot. I mean, they could be talking about a CRJ regional jet all the way up to a Boeing 787 or an Airbus A380. So who knows exactly what the size of this was, but this thing was massive. The balloon itself, to lift off the payload off of the ground and get it up to cruising altitude somewhere around 90, 100,000 feet up the ground, is astronomical. To give you an idea, by comparison and contrast, most of your long haul commercial flights take place. It depends on the direction that it's going and the region it's in, but most of them are going to be somewhere in the area of 38,000 feet to about 41,000 feet is generally the accepted ceiling for most commercial airline traffic. Um, so to throw that in an even better context, in a mile there's 5,280 feet. So do the math at 100,000 feet. This thing is a long ways off the ground, and you might think, well, why would they even use this um, for their purposes in spying on stuff or looking stuff over? Well, satellites can do it, but satellites are a long ways up. This is going to put it in a region where, if you've ever been in a jet and you're up to cruising altitude 40,000 feet and look out the window, you can see the curvature of the Earth. It's a long ways up there. So even though it's a balloon, people typically think of a balloon as traveling fairly low in elevation. If you've got the right camera equipment, being at 100,000 feet, you've got a miles wide swath of your direction of travel that you could accurately pinpoint things with cameras, assuming they're either operated through AI and in a predetermined calculus to gather as much information as possible, or remotely, or any number of things. So the Pentagon claims that, and the White House claims that this is something that, once it came into our purview and we were able to view it, they said we were able to stop the directional communication back and forth between China, in their words, because we knew exactly where it was. So I don't know if they had some jamming devices, um, or how that actually happened. And to be fair to Biden, I'm an equal opportunity political offender. So to be fair to him, um, see if we can find a picture of this. Come up here. Let's go to images. So yeah, here's what we're looking at. This behemoth up in the sky. Let's see. That takes us to a news site. But anyway, you can look through these things and kind of get an idea of how dang big this balloon was. Um, to give Biden a little bit of credit, and I think it's a little unfair to jump on the bandwagon and hastily say, well, we should have shot it down right away. There's a couple reasons why I would give Biden the benefit of the doubt. And unlike a lot of political pundits out there, especially those on the left, I will give a fair shake and say, well, number one, what did it have in its payload? Was there a real or a likely prospect that its payload contained, you know, even just nuclear waste or anything, that if you shot it down, now you've got a cone being blown by the jet stream that's going to have fallout all over America. So you've got that. Obviously, the Pentagon knows more about what's going on than they're willing to say. It's unfortunate we can't trust these federal alphabet agencies more than we can, but the FBI's put the citizens in a position of having to wonder when they're actually telling the truth, when they're giving propaganda. Certainly, there's a place for classified information to stay classified, but they've now created a landscape where you can't believe these alphabet agents. But again, going back to giving Biden the benefit of the doubt, he did take it down rather than let it sail off into the background. And it's going to be interesting. Excuse me for a minute while I grab my plug here, getting a low power indication. Um, it's going to be interesting to see the breadth and the width of what was going on and what the Pentagon and what the White House actually knew was going on. So they shoot it down. They're recovering it. I don't know, and the powers that be probably do. When they shot it down, it looked like they shot it actually in its payload area, which seems a bit unfortunate because that's going to destroy a lot of the stuff that we can reverse engineer and get a look at what they were doing and pulling. You know, if there's digital memory on there, pulling that digital memory and seeing what was captured, what was supposed to be communicated, and what actually was communicated back to uh, communist China. So good news is we shot it down. I think there's going to be a lot of details that come out. Dan Bongino's got a good principle that's one that I like to live by as well. Sometimes it's not best to make knee-jerk reactions right off the bat because you're only seeing a small sliver of the pie that's coming out. So fast forward to today, there's another story that came out, hit all the major news networks about another flying object coming up over Alaska. This time it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 feet. So this presents a unique challenge because that's, again, where we talked about earlier, aircraft fly generally at that elevation, you know, anywhere from 37 to 41,000 feet is your typical cruising altitude for these things. Well, they haven't said what it was, other than they did allude to a couple things, that it was an unmanned flying craft. It was verified to be that before it was shot down. Just the fact that they said that it was an unmanned flying craft almost makes me lean to believe, even with the history of the balloon, it could have been another balloon, but it pushes me to think maybe it was some kind of a unmanned drone this time. Um, anyway, they took that out, and it's going to be interesting as some of these details percolate and start to work their way up through the news cycles and get a little bit more information on this. So another big thing that's come out this week, obviously we had the State of the Union. Biden said a whole bunch of nothing burgers with his State of the Union, and I think you could accurately probably get just as much valuable information um, about what went on in the State of the Union, but just by using Joe Biden's soundboard, which yeah. So here's what they said. Hey Joe, it's time, Joe, for you to do your State of the Union. And Joe replies, "Oh no, probably best I don't." Yeah, so Biden said, "At best I don't." Anyway, he went on anyway. A lot of good things came out of the State of the Union. If he's sincere and honest about them. But Joe has a storied history of being a pathological liar. So, one of the big things that came out of the State of the Union was this whole thing about decorum Joe said a flat out lie and trying to mischaracterize Republican lawmakers, saying that they're going to defund Medicare, Medicaid, and everything in that bag. The problem is that's simply not true. He was trying to buy political points, create division, and good for the Republicans for shutting him down on it, to the point that it was uncomfortable enough that Joe had to walk it back at the State of the Union. And good for them. And it's interesting. I've seen a lot of stuff come out. I saw a post on Facebook that from an acquaintance of mine talking about the decorum, and he mentioned it was probably a little bit tongue in cheek that maybe the Republicans, if they like this kind of a show, should audition for the House of Commons, referring to what goes on in the House of Commons is that it's constantly a ruckus and a loud debate and back and forth in the House of Commons. And I mentioned the previous State of the Unions, especially with Trump. Did you watch it blindfolded and with earplugs in? Because I don't know how this could be some kind of a new revelation about a lack of decorum in the State of the Union, and certainly it's the place that the nation's business is done. And there's an amount of sacredness to it, but this was breached a long time ago. In particular, the best showcase of it was then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi shredding the paper document printout of the State of the Union address while it was still very much going, and she knew the TVs would catch it, and it would be great GIF material for her constituents to put out there on Twitter. Anyway, I'm not going to beat that one any further, but yeah, this whole decorum thing in the House. Okay, come on. Number one, I don't know that you could call it heckling. They called him out on a flat out lie, and Joe had to back it back because he knew it was a lie, and he knew the optics changed, and he looked horrible. So, going to some of the government's business taking place over in the House, you've got Jim Jordan, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, and a few others talking about what's going on with the Twitter files. As you know, Elon Musk bought out Twitter, and as the curtains get rolled back and the Wizard of Oz gets exposed further and further, we have hearings that are taking place in Congress regarding the Twitter files and suppression of stories. And we'll take a quick look at what Jim Jordan's got going on here.
Twitter didn't give me access to my laptop, but Special Agent Chan has said publicly, and the FBI has confirmed, that those documents did not relate to Hunter Biden, and that's my recollection of them.
What did they relate to?
Okay, so this is Yoel Roth. He is, I think his title was something to the effect of Chief Security and Compliance Officer with Twitter at the time, and nothing happened at Twitter that didn't get bounced off, CC'd, or BC'd to Yoel Roth, and he knew exactly what was going on all the time, or certainly in rapid succession after events unfolded, assuming he was busy or sleeping in his part of the world while activities were happening. But he is probably the cornerstone of the Twitter organization at the time.
My interactions with Agent Chan and with the FBI almost entirely focused on what the FBI called malign foreign interference, things like Russian troll farms and Iranian involvement in the elections, not on any type of domestic
Any of the
activity.
information on there classified?
No, sir, I do not hold a security clearance, and so I would not have received any classified information.
Who does hold a security clearance? I'm just going to second email here. I'm just curious about this. What I propose is that 30 days out from the election, this is another email to you from Mr. Chan. 30 days, we get temporary clearances. You pick who they are. Who were the people at Twitter who had a security clearance?
To be honest, sir, I'm not sure.
Okay, so to break this down a little bit, this whole chain of emails and Slack channels has been revealed by Elon after he took over Twitter and is pulling back the curtains, as I said. Here's the essence of what these committees are investigating and what they're looking at. Twitter was a private entity. At the time, it was a publicly held private entity. And to argue it fairly easily and characterize it in a manner such that everyone is pretty much going to accept. You're going to say this is a privately held uh, company that's in the business of creating a free speech town square marketplace. Um, Therefore, since it is held and is run by a board of directors, it's not a government operation. Twitter or YouTube or Rumble, or take your pick of any one of the social platforms, Facebook, Meta, right, wrong, or indifferent, from a constitutional standpoint, they can kind of probably get away with whatever they want to do in terms of silencing stories, changing algorithms, giving people a boost, giving people a ghost, because they are private, and there's very few regulations, especially with certain FCC regulations that hold many of these companies harmless, that date back to licensure of radio stations and TV stations, that they can get away with a whole lot. And nobody's arguing that they can't. Now, is it ethical that they do some of this stuff? That's another story for another time. I would argue probably not, with some of the big stuff they've been doing. And the lawyers and Roth and all these others over at Twitter are taking this stance of, hey, we're a private company. We can do whatever we want. Speech happens to be our platform, but the First Amendment and the freedom of speech therein is not covering what a private organization can and cannot do. Fairly carte blanche. Now, there are instances where private organizations are governed by certain federal employment laws. Um, you could break into unlawful racketeering if they're using it for organizations, but all that stuff is kind of a red herring argument, and I don't think anybody's even really trying to make it. But the problem is, what Jim Jordan is talking about here is, this is an email that's going back and forth. Well, it's a flurry of several emails, and there's several government actors that are involved in these emails from the alphabet agencies. Also, Twitter took on several former FBI and other federal officials who retired and went on over to Twitter to take their expertise over there, and still maintain these contacts back at Homeland Security, at the CIA, at the FBI, various DOJ positions, and they act as a liaison between Twitter and the government. So when he's talking about this email, who is set up to get classified clearances, he's talking about people that worked at Twitter, civilians. They're not government operatives. They are, well, they could be operatives. They're civilians, though. And he's talking about who didn't get clearance for which topics that the alphabet agency of the day that contacts Facebook and prompts them to do something we're doing. So this is important for a couple of reasons. Why? Well, number one, why are we passing out security clearances to somebody in social media? Would be one. And I would argue you can't successfully vet any of these people out with any kind of accuracy to give them a clearance, which is largely unnecessary anyway. They don't need to be in the business of licensing social media executives to have clearances for certain products. So the next logical step this takes you is they're communicating this stuff back and forth, and there's a treasure trove of documents from the Twitter files that have been released. There is, I can't think of his name right now, but there is a journalist who, that's kind of been his job over the last 2-3 months now, is making this information public and breaking down some of these emails and exploiting the crooked behavior that was going on behind the scenes. Okay, so now that we have this federal liaison between Twitter and the federal government and several large alphabet agencies, now we're starting to tread into water that isn't really uh, black or white. It's very, very muddy and opaque at best. So when you have somebody from the federal government contacting executives at Twitter and giving them information or prompting them in one direction, or saying, "Hey, just so you know, there's going to be a Hunter Biden story break just 2 weeks before the election by the New York Post." As soon as they start doing this and prompting it, Um, there's going to be room for a little bit of argument, but I don't know how, with a straight face, you can say that that is not government actively censoring speaking in the open marketplace, the digital marketplace, and town square. And that is a direct violation of probably the singular most important Bill of Rights in the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment. So we'll go on
Sure,
here.
and we never ultimately followed through on this plan to get temporary clearances.
Did anyone at Twitter have a security clearance?
It's my understanding that at least some current or former employees did hold clearances, but I wasn't certain about
Ms.
that.
Gaddy, do you know if anyone took up Mr. Chan's offer to hand out security clearances 30 days before the 2020 election?
Not that I'm aware.
So we don't know how many people had security clearances. Twitter, do we know? Mr. Baker, Mr. Gaddy, and Ms. Gaddy, anyone know how many people on Twitter had a security clearance in the 30 days prior to the election?
I don't know the answer to that question,
Ms.
sir.
Gaddy?
I do not know.
Mr. Roth, you don't know?
No, sir.
Well, how about the last one? Ms. Navaroli, do you know?
No.
I mean, it seemed like the offer was to sort of just hand them out like candy. I just wondered who had them. No one knows? Okay.
So you've got all these,
so the FBI
all
didn't
these
tell
big
you
shots with
that
Twitter that it is their job to know what's going on behind the company. They are beholden to the shareholders of Twitter at that time to make it a profitable company and to know what's going on. And none of these people, they just mysteriously have an absolute absence
violation of our
memory.
hack materials policy, nor is it clearly a violation of anything else. So I think what a lot of people are wondering is if it didn't violate your policies.
So here's one of the emails from Yoel. He's got it printed out on a big piece of poster board behind him that I'm sure probably cost taxpayers $500. But so thanks. We are aware of this and we are tracking closely. At this time, given the alleged provenance of the materials, aka a laptop mysteriously dropped off at a repair shop in Delaware, it isn't clearly violative of our hacked materials policy, nor is it clearly in violation of anything else. That said, the questionable origins here are obviously causing a lot of people to make references to 2016. And my personal view on this, unsubstantiated by hardware evidence yet, is that it feels a lot like a somewhat subtle leak operation. We'll be developing and recommending what, if anything, we want to do over the course of the next little bit. So it's funny that all of a sudden TikTok or not TikTok, might as well be TikTok with the Chinese, but Twitter and everybody is all of a sudden just outraged over this. It's a subtle leak operation. The Democrats are the authors at propagandizing and marketing of subtle leaks from the DOJ, and it's obvious that it's liberal-leaning operatives and employees within the government, because you look back at how much stuff leaked out on Trump's tenure as president versus the Hunter Biden laptop story. Not only did it really not get leaked, but when it did leak, it got shut down by Twitter at the behest of the federal government so that you and I couldn't see it within 2 weeks of a federal midterm or a federal election that's dropping into place, federal midterm election. So suddenly they're worried about these leaks. Well, you had how many leaks come out from the DOJ and all these others that were harmful to the Republicans, and yet they're worried about something being a subtle leak operation because it was harmful to one of their own grandstanders in the operations of their propaganda machine. So it's interesting how they pick and choose which ones that they're going to pay attention to, which ones they aren't. This story is continuing to break wide open. I'm going to kind of try to set my course to go into some of these details a little more deeply over the next coming Fridays that I do some of these. I know this one is going a little bit long, but there's a lot of material that I wanted to cover in here. Let's let's follow this just a little bit.
And they didn't tell you it was fake, didn't tell you it was hacked. Why'd you take it down?
The company made a decision that found that it did violate the policy. It wasn't my personal judgment at the time that it did, but the decision was communicated to me by my direct supervisor, and ultimately I didn't disagree with it enough to object to.
You know what I think happened, Mr. Roth? I think you guys got played.
Pay attention. This is.
I think you guys wanted to take it deep down. We saw what the chairman put up, where you said, everyone in the White House is a fascist. I think you guys wanted it to be taken down. I think you meet with these guys every week. We know that's been established in the Twitter files. You had weekly meetings with Mr. Chan in the run up to the election. They send you all kinds of emails. They send you documents on the super secret James Bond teleporter. You get information on that. I think you guys wanted to take it down. I think you guys got played by the FBI. And that's the scary part. Because we had 50, this to me is the real takeaway. 51 former intelligence officials 5 days after you guys.
This is spot on. So what he's saying is you guys wanted to take this down, and as soon as the FBI and others contacted you about this being a questionable leak and not being verified as reputable yet, they wanted to take it down, and that gave them the trigger to take it down, where they could pass the buck and say, well, it really wasn't us. But again, this falls directly in violation of the First Amendment if this persuasion is coming from the government. This is blocking free speech. And even if that story would have turned out to be 100% false, which was not the case, it's been validated by Hunter Biden himself by taking legal action against what was used against him in that laptop. That 100% vindicates the laptop story. It is real. It's legit. It has damning evidence on it. And it's unquestionably, irrefutably a true event that happened with damaging information to the Democrats and to the liberals of this nation. So he goes further, and what he's talking about is, if you remember, rewind back to when this story actually came out on Twitter initially, and then they abruptly blocked it, and then they blocked the account by the news outlet that leaked this story, or I don't even know if you call it leak, that announced this story and threw out the facts. You have 50 plus current and former intelligence agency bureaucrats come out and sign onto this letter saying this has all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign on it. So be careful who you listen to as experts, because Facebook, Twitter, everybody loves to say, well, COVID is a perfect example. We're only going to listen to the experts, and Mr. Fauci is the science on COVID, and nobody better counter him. Well, all these experts, 50 plus of them, were dead wrong. So were they wrong because they were absolutely played and clowned, or were they wrong because they were liars? I would dare say it was the latter. They knew damn well that this was a true story. This was all legitimate information that would have had the power to really throw out damaging ripple effect for the midterm elections from the point of view of Democrats. And they were willing to sell their soul and sign their name to permanently encase them in the hall of stewardship of federal liars and Democrat liars to further their cause. But I'm going to go ahead and cut this one down here. We're gonna go out maybe with wondering, what new information are we going to get this week? This week is going to be packed full of stuff, I have no doubt. And we'll have more information about Joe Biden and his beautiful balloon.
Take down the Hunter Biden story and block the New York Post account. 5 days later, 51 former intel officials send a letter and they say,